Hi Tanya, thank you for taking part in our employability video project. To start us off, could you tell us who you are and what your current trainee status is?
Yeah, my name is Tanya Jones and I'm currently awaiting my results for the first year of the BPTC. I've decided to study it part-time, therefore I'll be doing the civil litigation in September and finishing the course in June 2020.
Thank you. And can you tell us where you're studying?
Yes, at the University of the West of England in Bristol.
Thank you. And you're working while you study, so could you tell us a little bit about what your role is and also where you're working?
Yes, I'm a property litigation paralegal at Ashford Solicitors. So I deal with assisting the more senior fee earners in a range of sort of property matters.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on now and talk about your career development, and we'll start by me asking you the kind of going right back and asking why did you enter the legal sector, and then why specifically have you chosen to train as a barrister?
Okay. In terms of why I chose the legal profession, was just because I wanted to use more of an intellectual side of my skills. In terms of why the bar, I would say that I wanted to give people that couldn't necessarily use their voice the chance to be able to have access to justice, and I feel that using my legal skills and research to a really hard problem and then using that problem solving skills to then make someone's life a lot better, I actually feel that's really satisfying, and that's probably the main reason why I've gone into this profession.
Lovely. And when in your degree study did you decide that the bar was the route for you?
I was sort of deciding between the solicitor and the barrister route quite from an early age, but I would say the barrister route came into play midway through second year of my undergraduate degree.
So that was when you started to think, right, actually I need to take some action and really learn about what needs to be done for it to happen?
Yeah, I feel the bar is so competitive, and I feel that especially with the scholarship process, it started in November, which is just as you go into your third year, so I only really had the summer of 2017 to really sort of put, they say your A game on and your game face and really actually decide if this is the route, this needs to be the only route.
So you found that you were, once you'd committed, you really went for it and found all the opportunities you could?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been a sort of dead set career path if funding was possible.
Right.
So, like we'll discuss in a moment about the scholarship process, I do feel that it lingered on that process.
Right. Of course, you talked a little bit about the financial factors, which we'll get onto with the training, but also it's about qualities as well. It's a slightly different set of qualities. What qualities do you think, professionally, personally, would make a good barrister?
Number one, resilience. You are going to get a lot of knockbacks, and I feel like if you cannot bounce back from those knockbacks, then personally you're not going to cut it. I feel the amount of pupillage applications you have to do and the interviews that you have to actually undertake before you're successful, I've heard from sort of future, like pupil barristers, that it's really tough, and I feel that if you haven't got what it takes to brush it off and carry on, then you're probably not in the right field. And then secondly, time management. It is really difficult, especially to manage being self-employed. You have drafting, a lot of written skills, but then you could be in court for 5 days a week last minute. So I feel like if you're not that great at time management, then again you're probably not going to be that successful.
And time management can help the resilience as well, can't it? Because if you feel organised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about having a second option and having those fallback options. So, of course, there is no fallback option in the sense that the bar is the route that I'm going to go down and I will make it, but it's how you get there. I think that's what shows your resilience is there are many different ways into the bar, through self-employed, employed, so I feel like it would be beneficial for people to maybe understand the different routes in the bar and not maybe just narrow-minded that there's only one.
Yeah, I do think that's important, to get as much information as you can. For those people sitting watching this or listening to you speak, could you tell them about the route that you're taking through right from uni into becoming qualified?
Yes, so I have done the LLB, the undergraduate degree, which was 3 years. I decided to do the BPTC part-time purely because I am based in Plymouth and the closest provider is Bristol. I have a family, therefore I couldn't move out of the Plymouth area, so I felt like this was the best option for me. When I finish the BPTC, I'll be called to the bar by the Middle Temple, and at this point I will be able to apply for a pupillage, which is a 12-month training stage of the bar, which means that for 6 months you shadow a barrister and you sort of undertake work under their supervision, and then the remaining 6 months you go out it alone, so they say, and you become sort of self-employed in a way that you earn your own money, you have your own cases, and then if you're lucky enough to get a tenancy after that, you're a qualified barrister and away you go.
So that's it,
yeah.
we've sorted.
It's just getting to that point.
That's right.
Could be the difficult part, but...
So thanks for sharing that. You mentioned a couple of questions ago about the training weighing on financial support, because that's a very important part of any training route postgraduate, but particularly for entering the bar. So we're going to talk a little bit about your scholarship. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Seems like a long time ago.
Yeah,
I got that scholarship.
So let's talk about that. So when did you apply for the scholarship?
The deadline is always the first Friday of November. So I worked all summer, but the actual deadline was the 5th of November 2017. So I think I applied last minute because I wanted to make sure that I had everything on there.
And what research did you undertake, both into perhaps choosing your inn of court, also on what makes you successful in the process, and to make the best application you could?
I was lucky enough to go on a tour of all of the courts. 3 of them were actually funded by Plymouth Uni, which was an amazing experience. You got to see the sort of academic research side in terms of touring the library, but then you also got to have a networking and sort of lunch event with people that were already members of that inn. For me personally, I chose the Middle Temple because it's really good at diversity. So you look at all of the people that are members of the bar, and they tend to be working class, females, and I think that's a big problem with the bar at the moment. And I feel like different people are suited to different inns, so I feel, especially in my scholarship interview process, they asked why this inn and why you and why are you here, and I feel if you haven't got an answer to that, you can only apply to one inn. So if you're putting all your eggs into that basket, if you can't provide any reasons as to why you chose that inn, then they're not going to fund you the money. In terms of sort of research, it was just asking fellow students that had been through the process, people that had been successful, and just simple Google searches. What type of questions come up in scholarship interviews? And it is amazing how many people are willing to help you. And it's nice to know that now I'm in that position that I can potentially help people with theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. What were the steps in the process in terms of, so that was all research beforehand, you open up the form, what happens?
In terms of what happens after you apply?
Yeah, so you fill out the forms, and then what happens after that? Is it a selection process, interview, do you have to do visits?
Yeah, so with Gray's Inn and Lincoln's Inn, you are whittled down, so the application process, you're not guaranteed an interview. Middle Temple and Inner Temple have a 100% guaranteed interview process, so everybody that applies will have an interview. And I felt like on paper, sometimes you don't always come across your best, and it's actually the thick of the moment when you're in it, you're on your feet, and that's what a barrister is, it's thinking on your toes. Actually, you can't portray that ability on paper. So I felt like going to an inn that had the guaranteed interview would potentially give me the best scholarship chances. The interview process for Middle Temple, I must admit, is quite late in terms of the other inns. I was interviewed at the start of March and I didn't find out until May. And if you think I then started in September, it was quite a lengthy process, but in between the interview and the application stage there was no sort of telephone interview or anything like that. It was just, you were invited, and then that happened.
Okay. So you had a little bit of a waiting period at
Yes.
both sides of it. All right. So what advice would you give somebody who's watching this now or hearing it now? What advice would you give if they were thinking, right, shall I do this?
In terms of the scholarship or the bar in general?
To the scholarship.
Go for it. You've got nothing to lose. I feel, yes, you can get funding for the BPTC, which is now called the BPTS, but that's adding a master's element onto the degree. I've done that through personal sort of financial reasons, but it's tough to do the bar course and then to think that when you qualify from that course, you've then got to do a master's degree on top of that. And by that time, it's already too late to say no because you've taken the student finance. So the funding, the scholarship, you know, like I said, it's you've got nothing to lose. And I feel that if you can prove that you're good enough to get a scholarship, then you're already halfway there to prove that you've got what it takes.
Yeah. Great boost of confidence.
It is, yeah. And actually, when you make applications for pupillage vacancies, a lot of the chambers have at the bottom, why are you successful in the scholarship process? So I feel actually it makes a difference, because if it didn't, why is there a tick box? Yeah,
great. That's really good advice that people might not realise.
Yeah, I didn't realise that until I signed the tick box.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
And finally on this part around your training and scholarship, what is actually like on the BPTC? So again, maybe not just through the scholarship, but if you're going to go embark on that course, what is that course like, and what are the kind of stages you go through? What's your learning life like, work-life balance? You're working at the same time, so just give us an overview of actually what it's like to study that course.
Tough. I think people are maybe a little bit naive in thinking that it's like the LLB. It's nothing like the LLB. The LLB is very academic. The bar course isn't. It's very practical. The first session you're on your feet. You haven't got a chance to be nervous. You have to be confident. And I think just top tips are just get it wrong, because I would rather get it wrong at the start than get it wrong in my exam.
Great.
Worse off, get it wrong when you're in front of a judge that eats you alive. So I feel you just need to just be open to the fact that most of the things you learn on the law degree are not relevant, and you learn a lot more skills and you learn a lot more about yourself than you ever did on the course. In terms of workload, the reading is immense, so you have to put a lot of time in. And of course, I work 4 days a week now. It's tough, but then again, going back to the qualities, I've got good time management, so I'd like to think I'm successful, and I'll see on Friday if that's the case. But it's just, I really feel you can do anything if you put your mind to it, and if you want it enough, then you'll be fine.
Yeah. So when you said you're up on your feet the first day, is that through role plays? Is it?
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
It's through role play. It's just simple explaining who you are, introducing the person next to you, which is not so much what people think advocacy is, but all advocacy is public speaking. So actually, if you're that nervous just introducing the person next to you, I think you need to shake those nerves off to be able to really get into the good stuff, which is the advocacy. So it's all just part and parcel of it.
Great. That's good advice.
Yeah.
So to build up to finishing your degree and thinking about, being able to stand up and do that advocacy, what were you getting involved in whilst you were at university to build your skills?
Pretty much anything that the UPLS put on. So I did mooting, debating, negotiations. I feel that although negotiations is not always a part of the bar, it's definitely a part of what I do as a paralegal.
Right.
And without this paralegal experience, I potentially wouldn't be able to fund the bar. So I feel actually getting involved in that as well. And people have change of hearts. People decide that maybe the bar isn't for them and the solicitor route or Silex is the way forward. Therefore, getting a good grounding of understanding of all the skills I think is necessary. The civil mock trial I did in both the second and third year, and it's amazing how much you learn from the second year and you don't make the same mistakes again in the third year. I did work-based learning as opposed to a dissertation, so I had knowledge of real employment cases and represented 2 of our clients in tribunals, which was very good on the CV and was actually pointed out in the scholarship process. So I feel that really helped having the sort of practical experience. And then just volunteering. So I do parent advocacy with a learning disability gentleman. Yeah. So it's just, I really feel that a lot of people have the same CV as you. You are a carbon copy of many people that go to the bar. You have to work out what makes you different and why they should choose you over thousands of other people.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about lots of your messages so far is about a reflection piece, which is get it wrong. Like, you've got 3 years at uni to make as many mistakes as you need to so that you learn from them and put them right. So not just doing negotiations or like dispute resolution or work-based learning once, but like learning from it every time. And particularly like mooting and debating, where you can just keep practicing and becoming really well-rounded, because yes, you might want to be at the bar, but you're going to be working with solicitors or solicitors advocates a lot.
Yes.
And you're, you know, that's your client base and how you might get work. So you've got to have a good grounding
of what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think actually being a paralegal is amazing, because I know exactly what happens before we instruct barristers. So I know sort of what documents are going to come to me in years to come. And I feel if you've got that communication and that relationship with solicitors, then you're more likely to be successful in the barrister.
Yeah, I completely agree. Final question on your training and kind of career management, that is that becoming a barrister can seem prohibitive in lots of ways for any person. You know, even those that seem like they've got no responsibilities, nothing to worry about. It's, you know, it is a numbers game as well as, you know, being about where you're from. You've mentioned you have a family,
Yes.
and that you're working whilst you're studying. So anybody that's sat thinking, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to do it, or it seems like there's too many barriers, what advice would you give them?
My motto is, if you don't believe in yourself, why would anybody else? And I really do feel that if this is the route for you, then there is no option to not make it.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, I've got a family and I'm up till all hours and my child wakes through the night and you have to deal with financial problems and you're tired all the time. But look at what barristers' lives are like. That is what it is like. The reality is, yes, they're tired, they're stressed, their time management skills are put to the test, they're in court 3-4 days a week, they've got families and houses to run, and I feel if you cannot adjust to that, then maybe it's probably not the best career to go into, because you are self-employed. So at the end of the day, if you're not out making the money, no one's going to give you that money for free. So it's tough, but I believe in myself, so I think that's what gets you through, is knowing that one day you'll look back and think, that was all worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right to, you know, the reality is, if you don't make it, you don't make it, but if you don't try, you're definitely not going to make it.
Exactly, and I feel like that's a big part of what people perceive to be the lack of diversity. Is I am from a very working class family. My parents didn't go to uni. Yes, I have a family and I have to fund part of the bar course myself because the scholarship didn't pay for it all. But I feel, yes, I can sort of sit here and, pull on people's heartstrings and say, I'm working class, I'm white, I'm female. But actually, at the end of the day, we're all just people. And I feel that they're excuses. And I feel like actually if you push that aside and you prove to people why you can make it and how much you believe in yourself, then diversity is just, doesn't matter, does it? Because if you know you can make it, you just got to prove to them you can.
Yeah.
So that's all that matters.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Finally then, 2 final points, and this is much broader question, which is the law affects everything.
Yes.
So, whether you're working in it or outside of it, it's really important to keep up to date with things going on. So what do you see as factors that are affecting the legal sector that you think it would be good for students to keep up to date with if they're interested in the career and the profession?
I would say definitely when it comes to sort of fixed costs and funding. So because barristers are self-employed, they will not get paid 9 times out of 10 if your client is unsuccessful, if they've got no legal cover. Fixed costs have recently changed in the civil procedure rules in 2019, which as a fee earner and a paralegal I'm aware of. Probably wouldn't be aware of it as a student, especially in the undergraduate, because you don't do any practical CPR things like that until you're on the bar. In the scholarship process, and I know 100% in the pupillage process, you will be asked, what's your views on funding? Where do you feel like the funding could be cut elsewhere in the government? And I feel the funding, yes, affects the clients, but all in all, they are your clients, they're the ones that are paying your bills, therefore anything that affects the clients affect you. I feel fixed costs is a massive issue at the moment, because if they cap the costs, then that means that your wages or your sort of invoices are also capped. So I feel that is potentially a threat to the bar, but then you just have to be adaptable and think maybe crime isn't the best area to go into, maybe family isn't, and with Brexit maybe competition, or just different areas. I feel if you're, like I said, resilient and you adapt, then you can't go wrong.
So I'm really glad that you picked up about fee and wages and invoicing, things like that, because the key thing is that law is a business first and foremost.
Yes.
So I think for all students, I would always say, regardless of the sector you want to go into, you might want to go and work in theatre, whatever. Yeah. Everything's a business, so staying up to date with trade publications, looking at those kind of smaller news stories which you might not pay attention to normally is really important. Do you have any publications, social media sites, websites that you use to help you keep up to date?
So we use Lawtel, Lexis, Westlaw, which I think all of the university students, especially at Plymouth Uni, have access to Westlaw. If you go on there and subscribe to the legal updates, and they'll give you sort of legal updates in any field that you think's relevant. I would say don't just pick the areas that you're interested in, because yes, you could say I would never specialise in commercial or competition, but actually when you're thinking what areas you will specialise in, say employment, that employment or that employee has to work somewhere, and that is a business. Therefore, business law and things like that will always come into different sectors and affect those. So I feel you need a real commercial awareness to be able to sort of go in and prove to them why you want to go into that specific field, and that you do know all about it, because I think people forget that people come to you for advice, and we have it now in this office that we go to barristers for more specialist advice, in the hope that they know exactly what they're talking about. So if they've got no legal updates and the law changes every day, then you're effectively giving the wrong advice, because the case law changed overnight and you haven't read that legal update in the morning to be able to then advise your client. So I think getting involved with what we've got in Plymouth is the Plymouth Junior Lawyers Division. I think that's really good. They send out sort of a monthly update, and just go along to seminars. Yes, they cost money, but that money is definitely well spent when you can sit there in your interview and say, I learned something new this week, and that something new hasn't been spoken about, and then that's what makes you different.
Yes, definitely. And I always remember seeing you at
every event.
Anything that was that was there, and it's what I think of as compound knowledge.
Yes.
The tiny little bits, reading the newspaper every day or business websites, it just builds and builds up, and it makes you a bit more special and just feel a bit more confident in what you're doing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Tanya. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with the students before we let you go?
If you have any questions, just ask, because I think as a student you think people won't help you, and actually of course we're going to help you, because 2-3 years ago we were in exactly the same position, and I feel without the second and third year students when I was in my first year helping me, probably wouldn't be in this position. So I just think if you need any help, do not be afraid to ask.
Good, that's great advice.